Okay. So, comrades, welcome back. I hope, as always, the week has found you and everyone in a place of whole-bodied wellness. You're recording, just checking the recording. So today we also, again, have guest speakers. And I'll just say a little bit more about our guest speakers as we go on. I won't talk for very long, but I just want to give a heads up on a few things. As you of course know that I have uploaded all the marks for the first assignment, and I went through all of the assignments, of course, and there's feedback there. It's important for me to go through, I was just having a conversation with my comrades about, the markings and all this kind of thing, an instructor's marking as opposed to TA's marking. It's important for me, and it should be important for all of us to know exactly where we are collectively, consciously, politically, right, spiritually, in a whole body sense. So it's important for me to know where we are. In that context, and our first assignment being is the 10-point program, Black Panther Party's 10-point program. Just was our colleagues bringing our colleagues in on this, and a reflection on that using our course material, and also centering the I self. Profoundly inspired by your responses, by your voice. By your positionalities there, the way in which you use and converse with the material. So you'll see that most of my marks are what we consider to be very high. The only areas which perhaps I have maybe pulled back, and this is the issue with some of the issues which we have when we have a rubric, right? But I'm less concerned about the rubric, more concerned with instilling into us a sense of, this is where the feedback comes in, more sort of weapons with which to take up that second assignment, right? So where there are some, perhaps if you want to talk about, marks being sort of, I don't want to say taken away, I want to say not added as such, right? Would be in nudging folks, right, our comrades towards, conversing, yes, having conversations with our material, but also then having conversations with the lecture and the context with which the lecture places that material in, right? Which is an anti-colonial context, right? Which is also a context which we're very much familiar with now when we think about context related to the Panthers, right? And Panther pedagogy, anti-colonial pedagogy, ways of doing, ways of being, ways of knowing. So that takes us there, moves us there towards that second assignment, right? And it's a stepping of our bodies into those waters, right? Before we get fully immersed, right, into it, right? Overall, absolutely wonderful responses, and of course, I know many of our comrades, right, are not even familiar at all with this kind of, politics in terms of course material, right? But you are familiar, however, in terms of your lived embodied collective experience, right? And you fully stated that, right? So much respect to your comrades, right? So you will see now that I also have we have the rubric. That word still sort of irks me, right? But we have those guidelines and the / rubric there on the announcements page. You also have it in pages there. So please go to that, because the rubric is really, there are guides. It's a guideline, a set of guidelines with which to perhaps navigate through this assignment, right? The self and self-defense. What else will I say about that? Today, thinking of marks, of course, This will be the first, our comrades have a bonus mark for this, so our comrades have 2 bonus marks for a short 250-word reflection on this, right? On our conversing and engagement with you comrades right here. And that 250-word reflection can be, as always, right, expressed in any form of Englishnesses that makes us fucking comfortable, right? You know. And in any sort of doodles or anything we wish to sort of take that up, right? Or express ourselves in any form. But there's another way in which I can sort of bring marks, right? As opposed to taking off marks. And at the moment, I don't have a due date for that. But I'm also thinking that, you know, our due date will be, I've moved, the second assignment due date is now on November the 3rd. You'll be familiar with that. That's been pushed back or forward or whatever it is. It's been pushed on. And so a week later, let us say November the 10th, I'm looking at, I will notify everybody of this, right? That bonus mark due date is going to be, I think we're going to place it in around November the 10th. But again, I'll give everyone a heads up on that, right? And of course, extensions apply, right? You know, a guaranteed extension applies, right? I will be marking, working through the bonus marks. So any extension request, just ask me. As of course, and I've mentioned this before, in my notes, uploading in the announcements and in the rubric. But to repeat, any request for assignment 2 goes to our tutorial leaders because, of course, our tutorial leaders are the markers, right? So additional bonus mark for today. And then there will be a second bonus mark of 2% coming up when our third guest speakers come in on, I believe it is November the 19th, People's Defense. Comrades, I've dropped in, right, a favorite statement that I work with often, right? And it is Lilla Watson's statement, Indigenous activist from Australia, made back in the 1970s, that if you have come to help me, you are wasting your time, but if your liberation is tied up with mine, Lilla Watson says, bound up with mine, then let us work together, right? And that's how I understand comradeship, and that's how I understand self-defense, collective self-defense, right? You stand by me, I stand by you, we stand by each other. And that context being anti-colonial struggle and resistance, right? So we know full well that the term comrades, right, is very much an anti-colonial term. It's not individualistic, competitive term, right? It speaks about ourselves and our struggles and our resistances in the collective, in a community sense. So we have comrades, right? And there's a certain political commitment to that, right? You know, there's a certain political conviction that goes with that, right? There's a certain way of thinking, a way of knowing, a way of doing that sets how we understand our world and how we want to navigate it, right? Collectively, right? So we have a good set of material in here. We have comrades here from Wet'suwet'en, right, who are speaking to our comrades in Nelson Mandela Park School here, part of a project that I'm a part of, and also my comrades here. We have Chris from Justice Here for Migrant Workers, right, who is going to, we have articles there from our comrade space. More, we have also an interview with Isaiah Cada here, right? Nichole here, Two Spirited Peoples. Portion from that program and that organization. We are part of a tradition speaking to Two Spirited Peoples. We also have a favorite of mine, which is Colonialism is Doomed, Shea's speech in 1964 to the UN. And we have a video that goes with that, right? Collective comradeship, we also have Black trans folks as collectives taking up space in public space, right? Sherman Beaker and comrades here, right? How you talking about? And then we have a comrade of mine from a long time back who is here speaking with the Toronto Asian Action Committee at age 11 years of age, right? And I know Kabir always gets some a bit iffy with me pulling stuff like that in, but I think it is important because it's to bring this in because it's a part of our history of struggle in this city, right? Some of the incredible collectives and individuals that have been a part of who we are today, right? Next week we will move into Unity Comes Out of Consciousness, moving really, really more so into the Panthers. So, I will, and Unity, I think about the assignment, and many of you comrades, right, centered and foregrounded Huey's statement, unity comes out of consciousness, and work that and unpack that, right, in critical brilliance, right, through critical brilliance, right. Much respect again. So, I'm going to now introduce our comrades for today. It is 11:25. Unfortunately, one of our comrades couldn't make it, was not able to be here, was really upset and apologized for that. And of course, other stuff goes on in our lives, was not unable to come, right? Kevin. But hopefully, we'll see how we go, right? I know we're running out of time. We'll see how we go. But I think Kevin is here in spirit. So we have Nichole, Isaiah, Chris going to come up. And also, I should add the comrades of mine, right? Comrades stand by me, I stand by you, right? When we think about comrades, of course, we're also thinking in terms of, we give our lives, right? We put our lives on the line for each other, right? This is commitment, this is conviction, right? The understanding that struggle, right, is a life and death issue, right? Physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, right? Comrades, anybody would like to go first, speak first? And our comrades, in this moment, right, in this within this space here, going to talk about, I talk about life and death, going to talk about those really tangible, right, material aspects of our lives, life, work, and community, right, and living, all intertwined together, right? Nothing separated, nothing abstracted, cut away, right? All of this is together, right? All of a part of everything that we do, right? Everything that we are, right? Everything we aspire to be and demand to be, right? So, a big hand then for our first comrade, Chris Ramsaroop.
Thanks, good afternoon. How y'all doing, okay? So there's apparently 250 people who are, registered in this course, and maybe close to 100, so half people aren't here. Now, why I'm bringing this up is not to chastise anybody who's missing today's lecture. It's not about hearing me. It doesn't matter what I say. I encourage you to fall asleep when I yap. But it speaks to me about the quality of education. It speaks to me by the fact that most of y'all don't have time to think. You're stuck doing 4, 5, 6. You may take 3 or 2 courses. You're all working. And you don't really have the time to kind of think about what's actually being taught in the school. And that for me is a serious indictment of the failures of our post-secondary system. Now the second thing I want to say, this room is called the Apotex room apparently. And on this side, this is called the Pharmacy Lobby Association. Okay, everything wrong with our education system is located in this room. Now, for you, it's become normalized, and for me, it's become normalized that we have these donors who call this a Shoppers Drug Mart, whatever, the Walmart here, the Apotex room, the Pharmacist Lobby, and they name our classrooms. So maybe let's start off. Apotex. What is Apotex's relationship to the University of Toronto? Does anybody know? Nothing? Scared blanks? Okay, you might remember the story of Barry Sherman. He was murdered. they're the dudes and dudettes that started Apotex. However, Apotex also, and I still think they do, give lots of money to different things. And rich people and organizations don't give money because they feel good about it. It's about power and control. Back when I was a little bit older than you, I think I might have been in my 4th or 5th year or something. No, maybe 4th year. 4th year. There was a big controversy on campus. They had a professor named Dr. Nancy Oliveri, who worked here at U of T as well as Sick Kids Hospital. And she was conducting research that was funded by Apotex. And the funding had shown that there was some serious concerns about drugs that Apotex was making, and it was, I believe it killed a few kids in Italy, if I'm not mistaken. So she was trying to get this addressed and saying that there's some serious concerns that she wanted. And Apotex at that time did not want the findings to come out. And there's a huge kerfuffle here at this university in the media about the role of something called academic freedom. And what are the impacts of corporate donations or corporate fundings on research? And I would like to extend it further on dissent. All right? Now, most of you just want to come here to be on campus. The things that critical studies and equity programs want you to think about are stuff like what's happening with indigenous communities, racial brutality, police brutality, what's happening in Palestine. If money that corporate and big donors is going to limit your ability to do research on what you want, limit what you're able to say on campus, then I would strongly encourage you to think that that's very problematic. Right? No? Not sure? So partly the Apotex problem was that they gave lots of money to this university, and they were not happy with any academic research that may have their company look bad. All right? And that's not, of course, the only instance of this. And the reason why I'm focusing on my glory days is because I think in the 90s and early 2000s, we saw the most significant changes in our university around corporate donations. Okay? So I want to start off with Apotex in this particular route and why it is really concerning that these big people with money are naming our rooms. And I remember when I was on governing council for this university, some of us, not everybody, but some of us were very outraged about all this corporate money that was being done to build this building. And we didn't think the money should come from the province, not coming from corporations. So the other place here too, on this side, this is called the Pharmacists Association. So over here it seems to be called Apotex. And on this side, it is the Pharmacist Lobby. Now what is a lobby group? Anybody? A lobby group? No idea? Oh, yes?
They try to persuade the government to act in their interest.
Good. All right. Now, I know most of you are just too overwhelmed. You don't really give a crap. You want to get the hell out of this university. You probably got massive debt, so you want a job. Right? Does that sound where I'm at for most people? Who wants to get a job? Who wants to get good marks? And who wants to just get out of this place? Put your hands up. Okay. Now, the thing is, what universities do not do is teach people how to think, and they don't teach people how to engage. And do you think the pharmacy lobby is going to the government of Ontario and saying, let's make our education more accessible. Let's try to lower tuition fees. Let's try to make sure our education system is equitable. What do you think? Okay. So why would a lobby association be giving money to a university to name their classes? Anybody want to take a shot? Yes?
So that they control the information that comes out of it?
Yeah, influence. And with our so-called democracy that we have here in Canada and in Ontario, what we're seeing, and it's always been the case, I don't want to ever say that this is, we've ever had a perfect time of democracy where the voices who should count, the rest of us have had equal say. But what we have seen over the last little while has been an intensification of the power of lobby organizations to control over every aspect of our society. If you follow the news recently, the Minister of Labour, the province, his name is David Piccini, he's gotten himself in a little bit of a tizzy because he's been found to be partying and going to the weddings of lobbyists who are getting millions of dollars in return from him and from employers, right? So if you've got a Minister of Labor who's supposed to be taking care of the working class and supporting the issue of working class, is that actually happening? In my opinion, that is a no. So lobbying is really, really, really important. You see, University of Toronto is a lobbyist. They hire government relations. And I will assure you that when they are going to lobby Queen's Park or the federal government, they're not talking about the quality of education in your interests. They're talking about the institution of this university, which doesn't necessarily align with what you think your best interests are. And maybe let's talk about what some of these best interests are. What should a university mean to you? Anybody want to shout out?
School, education.
Huh?
Education.
Education.
Academic education, getting a good job later.
Getting a good job. What else?
Breakdown of barriers.
Break down barriers. Okay, a good job. Break down barriers. Socialization. Want to add? Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
Critical thinking skills.
Critical thinking skills. Okay. Tuition fees? Should tuition... don't laugh. Should tuition fees be lower? Who says yes? Okay. Now, right now is a very important time. Do not get fooled by these bastards. Okay? Don't get fooled. What you're going to be hearing right now, because you all have had a tuition freeze for a very long time, that it is imperative that they increase your tuition fees. That is not the case. What's happened over the last several decades is the provincial government has not invested to properly fund post-secondary education. So they've done everything else, including screwing over international students, to try to cover some of these costs. But the core issues around funding and what the province should be doing to make your education better. Okay? So they make it seem like it's a either or, and where you should end up with the short end of the stick. And one of the ways, the most important way that you have to have your voices heard is through people power. And people power is important to contesting these lobbyists, because the lobbyists are spending all their time trying to get the government to do what they want and not what you want. So, that little rant was my little introduction. And just tell me to shut up when, all right? So, I came to campus. Wu-Tang had just gotten big, right? So Wu-Tang was getting big. That whole thing between the East Coast, West Coast was happening, right? So Tupac and Biggie were doing those things. Nirvana was big. You know, all of us were listening to Smashing Pumpkins. God forbid how brutal they are now politically, but this is what we're all doing. I came to campus to party, right? I didn't really come to campus to be scholastic. I'm not even a real academic. I've never been that good. So I didn't care. Campus was a very, very apolitical and very large space. It was hard to become engaged with it. And a couple of things happened in '95. They had massive tuition fees protests. We then also started to get concerned about other issues that were happening on campus around racism, faculty hiring, what type of courses that were being taught, the corporatization of our campuses. And I found a few different groups of people who were wacky, misfits, and we formed our own, activist groups. I was involved in ASU, the Arts and Science Students Union. I ended up becoming president of UTSU, the University of Toronto Students Union. And I did also some time on the board of governors for this godforsaken place. But we started a few groups called the Student Action Crew and the Campus Coalition. And our idea wasn't simply to engage in traditional form of politics or lobbying or to kiss ass to the administration. There's a lot of people that come to campus and think you need to dress in a suit and tie to have respectability from them. You need to speak a proper way. You need to have this certain form of civility, right? You keep hearing this stuff on this campus. You need to be civil. But the idea of civility itself is a form of violence. When people can't eat, people are facing tremendous choices between coming to school and trying to feed their families. So the fact of a university education is not a civil space, as much as they try to claim for themselves. Many people are struggling to be here, and there's multiple ways that our voices are being silenced as faculty and as students. So I did ASU, I did times with UTSU, the Government Council, OPERG, and a few other groups. At my time at the university, the issues that were big, we occupied the president's office a bunch of times. The first one was on tuition fees. Another time was around racism, both within the curriculum and the hiring of professors. One was named Dr. Kim Yip Chun, another was named a faculty law professor named April Burry. George Bush Sr., anybody ever heard of that dude? George Bush? Yeah? Okay, George Bush, he's a genocidal maniac bastard who's responsible to the death of millions of people. What you may or may not know is that in 1997 or 98, George Bush got an honorary degree from this university. Anybody knew that? It was one of the wildest days on this campus. It was awesome. It was awesome. One of the biggest protests that I've ever seen. And you know, a lot of faculty don't do shit, right? They just kind of whatever. They're too busy. Even some of these people who are not very politically active, all of them felt it necessary to either walk out of the convocation or to sign letters, right? So it was a way to mobilize and bring people together in contestation. But George Bush's genocide and him being a war criminal was only part of the picture. The other part of the picture was, does anybody know the Munk Center? Okay, does anybody know Joseph Rotman? Okay, the Rotman Commerce Center. So Rotman was on the board of governors with me, I think, at the same time. And I think he's dead now, and Peter Monk's dead now. And George Bush, he's dead too, isn't he? Oh, well. So George Bush had received an honorary degree as a kickback. Peter Monk had given the university $6 million to name the Monk Center after him. And the person that was helping to bring this all together, Joseph Rotman, who was a massive donor, right? So we've got this war criminal getting an honorary degree. We got this building named after Peter Monk, who's done horrific stuff overseas. And we've got Rotman, who's a big economically influential person here in Ontario. And part of this agreement, and most of you are like, well, who cares, right? I don't care about any of this stuff. The significance about this is that the Monk, when they signed the agreement, Monk was interested in curtailing academic freedoms. And it was an agreement signed with strings, which means it would have some influence over what is being taught. And that apparently is a big no-no on our campus. So it got exposed, and there was massive protests, and thousands of people came out. One of the biggest ones that I've seen in a very, very long time until what happened last year. My mom came out and she started telling off, cussing up Ted Rogers. You know Rogers Media? So he was alive then, so my mother was cussing him out. It was fun. We had a great time. So for us, it was thinking about not simply protesting, but thinking about dissent, thinking about what a university's role should be. And that's being inclusive, trying to be open for everybody, connections to the community at whole, and trying to challenge the idea of power. So not where Jordan Peterson could go around talking about people's genders, but looking at who has power in this university and how do we take that away from them, right? Showing this inequality that exists. Part of the outside stuff that we did, we ran a free university on campus and invited the members of the community to come set up their own classes. We did a camp out at Allen Gardens around homelessness. And we were also, there was one other thing that we did back then too, that it'll come back to me. So in addition to sit-ins and protests and occupations, I almost got expelled during my master's for protesting. So I was facing expulsion and criminal charges at the same time with a group of other students. So that took, I'm here, so obviously I didn't get expelled, right? So, but these are good important sites of knowledge. So if anybody is involved in protesting, you may want to do Freedom of Information requests to see what type of information they have on you. We were also involved in multiple legal cases against the University of Toronto. So I had challenged their electoral processes about how people got involved in governing council. It was going to go to the Supreme Court, but we got a little scared about costs, so that didn't happen. And you can talk to me afterwards about the other ones. So as a result of my stuff here on campus, I also got involved with the farm workers. And I've been working and organizing with farm workers for basically the last 25 years of my life. So in addition to teaching on this campus, I go out to the fields and have been involved in fighting against the injustices, what I see there. How much time do I got?
15 minutes.
15? Okay. Any questions before I begin this part? All right. So I'm going to talk about a couple things about why and what are some of the understandings that we have of what's happening on the farms. And if you take my other classes, I kind of go into some of these themes more. But there's a particular way that people had tried to understand what was going with migrant workers. Do people know what migrant farm workers, who these people are? Anybody have an idea? Yep, okay.
I mean, my stepdad's dairy farmer, and the other people that work on the farm are from Mexico. So
Okay.
that's all I know. I know that it's here, that it's happening a lot, and they definitely are underpaid, because even he's underpaid compared to how much they make. So they definitely think he's like a head milker.
Okay, so they're screwed. Okay,
Yeah.
anybody? Yeah. Yeah.
They're like people from, like, across the globe, like often from like Latin America, the Caribbean, or from like Southeast Asia, who are here under like the temporary foreign worker program, and so they're like exploited. They get paid really low wages, live in terrible conditions, and work really long hours. And some of them like get really sick or die here as well.
Okay, good. Yep, yes, sir. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I know that in the context of like the Middle East, because I grew up there, but I know that migrant workers there, usually from South Asia, Southeast Asia, also live in awful working conditions and face wage delays many times. So they're basically told that, yeah, we're going to pay you, but then they never actually pay them. And then I actually did like a whole presentation on this too. And then at the same time, there's specifically, like there's specific areas where they can live and where they can't live. And their workers get to withhold their passports and traveling rights as well.
Yeah.
Which is really common there, especially.
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay. So.
Chris, is a
Oh, sorry. I gotta get new glasses. I always can't see that far. Yep.
mic in my hand now.
Okay. So this is something you all need to care about. Not because it's what I care about. Right now, at this particular time, we're seeing the most heightened anti-immigrant sentiment ever. Right? And all of it is bullshit. And why I'm saying it's bullshit is because they're saying particularly young people, like many of you, people who are at a university, aren't getting jobs, and it's the fault of temporary foreign workers. That, of course, is not true. Right? The idea of labor shortages on the one side, and they're saying that the other side, that young people aren't getting jobs. Now, the other thing what people aren't seeing, so right now the federal government is going to get rid of lots and lots of jobs. The federal government's also one of the highest employers of young people as well, too. So while some people rather condemn and pit groups against each other, nothing's being done to address working conditions for all people, and the people, the main drivers of good jobs for young people, are now in the process of cutting them. So be really careful about the discourse that's happening, what you're seeing on social media, what you're hearing from the political class. It's all bullshit, all right? So, and I am more than happy to talk more about that a little bit later. So there's a couple of theoretical frames that come to our understanding of farm work in Canada, and the reason why migrant workers come. So one is this idea of a labor shortage. There's an idea that they don't have enough people to work the farms or work laborers in different, now service jobs and Tim Hortons, etc., etc. My argument is that it's not about labor shortages. It's about controlling and containment of people. They want what we call a captive or unfree labor force, where they basically are able to control their movements through immigration policies that tie workers to a particular farm. Why do I say this? Because I literally got dozens, if not hundreds of people who are now undocumented, who are now trying to get other jobs, and can't do so, right? So I've got a group of people who want work, but they're not allowed to work, and then I've got another group of people who are controlled on their farms, right? So labor shortages in many cases, in many industries, is about control, containment, and surveillance, and the unwantingness or the inability of the employer class to actually improve conditions. So for example, Tim Hortons. So they want you to work at Tim Hortons, but because of those immigrants who are there, they've got their jobs. So therefore, they're bad and you're suffering. But nobody, of course, is talking about, giving benefits, giving free tuition to work there, improving working conditions, giving people access to unions. That, of course, is not on the table for anybody, right? They want people to compete for really, really shitty jobs. All right, so the idea of that. Now, the term unfree labor is a larger understanding of how workers are coerced. In many conversations, and I hope we can talk this, if I take my other class, we use the word modern day slavery and human trafficking. That's very common now by a lot of people. Myself and others, we critique these terms as very, very problematic. And I can get to that a little bit later. But the idea of unfree labor is to look at multiple ways of how people are controlled, right? Particularly for economic reasons. Others, like myself, would also talk about colonialism and racism and how those are also sectors of coercion to describe unfree labor. Another component about unfree labor is the idea of racialization of labor. Now, the FAR program, and I'll go very quickly here. Canada has always had a tumultuous relationship with agricultural labor. We've had people who are free and people who are unfree. Unfree groups, for instance, have been Indigenous communities around 6 nations who've been brought in to work on farms. We had child labor. We brought in kids, the Bernardo kids from England, to come work on the farms. We've had free labor, such as English people coming in, and after World War II, the Dutch and the Polish. We had incarcerated Japanese people. You might consider this something that happened in British Columbia, but this is what's going on right here in Southwest Ontario as well too. So we've had different forms of populations which are controlled and other people who were free. Now, Saktovich, or Victor Saktovich, who teaches at Hamilton, looks particularly at the period post-World War II. He focuses on the Dutch, who came to Canada as free people, the Polish people, who had some restrictions but then had mobility. In the 60s, when they brought in black people and then brown people from Mexico, they changed everything. They did not provide them labor mobility, no labor freedom, no ability to live here as equals. They were stuck on their farms and had to return home at the end of the contract. This, of course, was not, and I think some of us, we have this idea, and the thing that we talk about in discrimination is it's not about the intention, it's about the impact. And I want you to all think about this, and that's important for us to understand racism. But very much, I think, in this particular case, it was deliberate, right? That they did create a system where black and brown people were not allowed to live as equals. Now, why do labor conditions look so different? And this is a term called agricultural exceptionalism, and I'm going to couple that with zones of sacrifice or zones of exception. Agricultural exceptionalism means they create spaces where the law doesn't operate or the law operates very differently. So in agriculture, it's illegal to form a union. Workers don't get access to overtime or holiday pay or other protections from the Employment Standards Act. They're excluded from some provisions of the Health and Safety Act. And this has been constructed so that farms could increase their productivity. All right? Sacrifice zones basically means the idea, and then we've got terms such as necropolis, where some communities are placed in positions to die so other communities could live. In the example of farms, there are no real protections around chemicals and pesticides. Workers live on the farm property for the most part. So they're very much living in a situation where their lives matter less. And the COVID pandemic really situated and illustrated that as well too. All right, just I guess in the time, because I know that you're getting bored hearing me. So I'm going to talk a bit about different forms of resistance, right? So I've talked a bit about kind of the structure of the program, people are tied. I've talked about kind of a bit of the history. Now, a lot of times when they position the idea of migrant workers is that they need to be saved, right? Outside people have to come in and save this poor class of people. So the way that we try to understand our work is that we're not saviors, right? We don't have all the answers. Workers should be central decision makers. They understand what the reality is on their farms. It's also important to situate this, right? This work is not apolitical. This is not something that's based on a liberal dimension that exists today. This is very much a legacy of slavery and indentureship. And that also influences the way that we think about resistance as well as work. We try to bring workers together because the entire program is set up to pit different groups of workers against one another and to pit white workers against other communities as well too. So they situated this way in such a way. So we try to bring people together. We support workers when engaged in wildcat strikes or exposés around working conditions. We've done public manifestations, helped with worker exposés. We did a few, yesterday if you saw, there was a story in the Star. There's a massive 200 to 300 migrant workers are losing their job at a Highline a mushroom plant in Eastern Ontario. So we try to address those type of issues as well too. And we've also set up a migrant farm worker legal clinic, and we've been doing a lot of grunt work cases, not just simply to undertake a case for charity, but try to use that for organizing. Some cases we win, such as a case involving Kenny Florent, a farm worker from St. Lucia. We were also involved in suing the police and the government for racial profiling, and both the human rights case and the class action have been successful legally. We supported a bunch of injured workers who are owed lots of money for their injuries, and a policy that was racist has been sort of stopped, but it also needs to be fought more. So I just also want to close off by naming some of the workers who we met who are no longer with us. People like Garvin Yap, Omar Graham, Vincent Bruce, Ned Peart, Sheldon McKenzie, Bansraj Dalbury, Tyron Lee Jackson, and many, many more. And why we always do this in these talks is that both the legal cases or the organizing that we're taking part, these people have been part of our community, or their legal cases are embedded with their names, right? So it's not just simply about thinking about people as the abstract, but these are members of our communities who were loved and are loved, and their family members continue to work and to organize with us. So one of the things I want you to consider is, think about our courses, think about non-traditional work, and think about the role of a student and not simply just being here, to take up spaces, but how do we actually fight for an education system that makes us want to be in our classes, not simply says we have to. Thank you.
Chris, maybe we can leave the questions also to later, right?
Yeah.
Can I just ask, if our comrades want to get involved with Justice for Migrant Workers, can they do that? And what would they do?
So, all right. So the front, to be totally open and honest, I'm terrible with recruitment. I'm the worst. So there's a couple things I would suggest people do. Number one, are you all members of ESU, Equity Studies Students Union? By virtue of being enrolled in an Equity Studies class, you are an ESU member. OPERG, you guys know what OPERG is? Okay. OPERG, you pay membership dues to OPERG, the varsity, CIUT. I would also suggest on campus is to organize a community, like a club, an organizing club around migrant justice issues, and that would be a good way to move forward. In the second semester, I believe Farm Worker Awareness Week is coming up, so they may want to try to organize around that. And we have some of the events coming up here. Oh, and we're going to do a film series that you could watch online with us in November 5th to the 8th. And there's a play called The Christmas Market that's starting November 4th, if people want to come to that.
Chris. So Nichole Leveck, big hand for Nichole. Nichole
It's really great to be here with all of you, and also to hear Chris. We were blessed to spend some time with you last year as well. And Chris, just as you were saying, like, to start off, being a student and how you are and how we present ourselves in our course material, what we're intaking. I'm a former equity studies student, but in the way of like how you all are now. As we know, equity studies, you're never ending. It's your life. It's being able to live life in this world that's unjust on so many levels. So I remember when, I forget what lecture hall we were in, Gabriel came to speak. And Gabriel is a migrant worker, or was, I'm not too sure where they are right now. And now in our indigenous culture, and same maybe with yours and how you were raised, when you're intaking a story it's not just like a story, like we pick up a book and are like, you know, a fairy tale. This is a life story. This is a gift to you. So when Gabriel came to speak, I couldn't sit in those chairs just because of who I am. It was too restricting. I had to sit just as Stan might be sitting right now, right up front, free from that, like the arms of the chairs, to be able to fully intake this gift I'm getting, is Gabriel sharing their story with me. And it was one of the most important lectures that I've ever been to. You know, like thankfully that day, like I was fully present. I know, you know, as Chris said, it's very hard sometimes. You have so much going on in your lives. You're taking in so much. You got papers, you got this, you just got your marks back. Oh my gosh, all of these things. I know. And I didn't even finish my undergrad, right? But the surprise to me wasn't so much like, okay, I took that information in and it was one of the greatest moments in my life. I can recall almost every moment of that day when Gabriel was sharing exactly what it was like for them to be a migrant worker, to be in that oppressive system. But it was afterwards where Gabriel came up and was like, who are you? Because I wasn't just at the back. You know, not to say it is anything, you know, we're here, we all intake information as we are, but it was just my personal experience, because it was like Gabriel was able to notice, you are fully listening to me, and now I'm going to give that back to you. And to me, that was a great gift. So I know, you know, sometimes it's those little things of how we receive information, right? And for some of us, we're different learners, right? Some of us, we can't. Some of us have to be doing something, but we're fully listening. Like I remember my son, you know, he works in our crisis team, our 211 community crisis team at Two Spirits. When he was a little boy, they said that, oh, he had all these learning disabilities and was tested at school, because he'd be playing off to the side and you think he's not listening, but then he can turn around and recall everything to you that you just said. And that's where I am now in my life. You know, I studied for a while here at U of T. Before that, I did, you know, many different things in my life. But now currently, I'm a service coordinator for our Ontario Autism Program's Urgent Response Service. So I work with a lot of our young people, especially a lot of younger children in the developmental sector, those who are in complex special needs. So before I started that, like, as I said, I was here, you know, as a student. I remember I was in the transitional year program. And one of the things that I remember is our orientation. Anybody here went through TYP or is currently? I know the rest of you who came through on your own way, you know, to the university. I have a lot of respect for that. But there's this little special place in my heart for TYP students, you know? And, you know, the intro, the orientation class, right? Where you come in and all of the elective professors come in and they, you know, you can take sociology, you could take, you know, all these different equity studies, you can do all of these things. So I was set, just by the name of it, I'm gonna take sociology. That's what I'm doing. And I sat in the back. I always sit in the back of the class because I like to take in all the information, right? So if, say, somebody asks a question, I can see you because I'm in the back, right? And I can fully hear what you're saying because I can see your body movements. And all of this, so I'm like sociology, and I heard that professor get up and talk and give the intro of what that is, and I'm like, yeah, that's what it is. I'm gonna do that, right? And then all of a sudden the back door opens, and somebody comes out and they're just staring at the room, right? I was like, who is this? And it felt like a familiarity, like a safety, because they're not just coming into the space, they're actually critiquing the structure of the place we're in. You know, and the type of person I am, when I was a little kid, I would always look at how things are built, and I'd be like, my dad, you know, like, Dad, how come it looks like this, and what is this, and what is this? And sometimes you get really frustrated because I ask all these questions, right? But it felt safe because it was little things that I noticed as well, too. And then it came down, read Yo Yes, threw down the book and said, this is equity studies. And that was it. And here we are today, right? And I had a hard time, like as I mentioned, I had to sit in the back. You know, sometimes I would have to learn to write notes, right, from not looking at my paper. I couldn't write on a computer, right, because I didn't know the keyboard off by hand. So I had to learn to stare at the professor or whoever was talking and learn to write. And at first it was scribbles, and then it got a little neater, I could read it. So accessibility, I was already registered with them, and I talked to my counselor there, and they're like, maybe you have a learning disability, you know? Here's a grant, go get assessed. I was like, all right. And I remember the assessor said to me, oh, you take equity studies. Well, what's that? And I tried to explain it. Like, kind of like life, like, you know, look at the world, you don't see what we live in, right? But I'm also talking to, I have to remember who I'm talking to. I'm talking to a psychologist who gets to tell me about me. I don't know what life they have, what their lens is. I remember coming back to Stan and being like, yeah, this is what they said to me, like, and Stan, your reply is like, it's to be able to live. And that was it. And it was like, yes, equity studies is being able to live in a world with colonization, with oppression. Being able to look at how different forms of that same imperialism, colonialism, nationalism, how all of that works in different ways. You know, as Chris mentioned, like you have those who can come in and have freedom and some that can't. Some might have a little, some might have a lot. And we look at all of that. So it really is. And now, you know, I didn't think I would be where I am today. But what I learned here just solidified my lived experience from when we were young, growing up as little kids and learning the world. And now we get to put it into like words, and we get to critically analyze it and develop our critical thought, right? So it's in my everyday. Like before I came here, I did an intake for a new family whose mom hasn't even got a permanent residence card, but her child needs support. The child's nonverbal. They need some support within our school system. So then I had to think, how am I going to be the best person to support this family? And you know, in that beginning, where Sam brought that quote, that I think of myself, because I think, how do I describe to you or anyone else what I do now as a service coordinator? And I always say, we have in our culture our term, an ashkabewis, right? It's a helper. It's that I'm standing beside that family and helping from their direction. I'll be like, okay, you need this? Okay, let's see if I can get this. Let me see how I can help. Help in the way of it directed from them, right? And that's the work that I do now. You know, but the more important work that I do in the way of, you see, I clock in, I clock out. I get to like, okay, I'm not gonna read my emails today. I'm not a service coordinator at this moment. You know, I'm a community member. I'm a parent, I'm a partner, I'm a comrade to all of you. And, you know, I've done lots of things in my life. Like sometimes I think about, oh my gosh, you know, so like all the things that we do, but it's just being myself, right? I dance. I teach young people how to dance in our cultural ways. As you might have saw the video, I think I'm in there with dancing jingle, you know. I was a member of ESN back when we had the pandemic and we had that lockdown, and we had a lot of our community members left with no home, with no support. You know, in ESN, some of you might know, were founded from that, and you know, it's like, okay, how can we help in that way of direction from community? Because I remember I'd be out and we'd do a couple circles with Les Harper at South Riverdale, and Isaiah would sing, and I would dance, and we'd be there in the community out at Moss Park. And I'd see these people coming out, and they're just helping. They'd be asking me, what do you need? Okay, here, we might get this, you know, and help. And then one day I just started chatting with them, and they're like, here, come. So I used to go out every Saturday with the team. And it was really beautiful because there was somebody there who's actually lives in the encampment who became a part of ESN. And then it was flipped, like in the way of we're helping them, helping their own community that they live in, right? So it's like also knowing when you as a helper, when do you step up and when do you step back? When do you then you're in this role and you get that momentum going, but it's also having that awareness of when that's not your role and when you pull back, right? You know, and in dancing in our Panthers project, being able to be there with the young people, you know, and helping through really difficult times, you know. As a jingle dress dancer, it's not just something that we do like, okay, you make a dress, you do that thing. It's a responsibility, it's a role that you have within community. And it's a really important one. So when we know that our young people had lost somebody dear to them, it's like what can you do in those times? And a role of that dress is to take on that responsibility of praying for that healing for community. As Isaiah can speak a bit more to that, is that what that is on his part as a singer. You know, and Isaiah's my partner, as you might know. We're parents to a few children. Our youngest child is two-spirited. Told us that they are a two-spirited individual from when they were 5 years old. And as all of you know, I work at Two Spirits, right? So we have a really strong presence there in the community for our two-spirited community members. We support and we're a collective, right? And I myself personally, I have teachings on that from my grandmother of our two-spirited people. There are medicine people from my teachings. So it was something when Indy was like, well, you know, so it's to take on also a role of being a parent to one of our medicine people and also to what that means to society, right? What is allowed and what isn't, and how do we best support our young people? You know, and that's kind of me and what I do. So when Stan's like, hey, do you want to come here? Like, yes, we're here to, you know, it's more of showing up, and when you're asked, being a part of, you know, as Stan said, that struggle that we have, it's not, there's no, we're tied together. We might be from the First Nation community, but also too, I'm of mixed nations, right? It was hard as a young person, walking through a world where you're in really white spaces and you're not them. And then you're in other spaces, non-white spaces, and you can be assumed that you are them, right? It's very weird, right? But I was raised with my grandma, my birth mom. She left when I was little, so I was raised with her. So my identity was really tied to her. But then, of course, when we travel through the world, people see us how they see us. And we can't overly control that. But we know who we are, right? And the experiences that we have. So that's why I say, when you write from that perspective of I, and stand here and be like, oh, look at you, you must go through this. And we can assume these things about each other, but only we know each other, ourselves, right? And who we are in the stories that we have. So that's one of the great things that I like about, you know, courses such as Stan's, is being able to share from your own lived experience and be open to learn from others. So I don't know how too much time I have because I wanted to also pass off to Isaiah, who can speak on that. And we do a lot of work together, right? We met at the Native Canadian Centre, Toronto. I was just a community member, accessing services. I ended up, Isaiah was working there at the time. He taught a singing class. He taught my son Justin, who I spoke about earlier. And he would just be like, this Isaiah, he's great. Oh, Isaiah, and everything, when you have like a mentor as a young person, that was Isaiah too. And then I met him, and then later on, we became a couple. And there's times where, like, even our work that we do, Isaiah will speak more to his work. Even the work that I have at Two Spirits and the work that he does at Anishinaabe Health. It's intertwined together. It's our life, and it's our work outside of that. And we'll go many places. He sings and we dance. Indiana is a dancer. It's our lives, and it's also to being there to support each other, our community, and our bigger community outside the Indigenous community. Okay. So I'm gonna come in up here.
So everyone, can we just also have a big hand now for Isaiah Cada, please?
Bojo, that's good. Bojo, how y'all doing? Come on, how y'all doing? Kind of weak, but all right. Before I get started I'll introduce myself a little bit. My name is Isaiah Cada. I'm Ojibwe, born and raised here in Toronto, Ontario. My family comes from Mississauga, Blind River. Before I get started, I wanted to speak a little bit about that first word that I said, that Bojo. Some of you guys might see it on like the TTC stops or things like that. You see it all over, right? And a lot of the time you'll see that it means hello. That word, it has a greater meaning than that, right? As they dissect it and put it into the English language, it becomes that small word hello, hi, right? Another word we have, you might hear is ani. Even that word, it changed over time. That word wasn't what it means, but to our people, it's like, what's up, ani? You say ani, right? But that word bojo, it has a great meaning to it. It talks about that creation story, the first of time to us, those first beings, and that first sound, they say, there was a sound, they said, and it was that Jishigwan, to us, that sound, that just speaks of that word, right? That's what that word speaks about. But that first sound, they say, it came from Chibia Bojo, that one of those first beings. Chibia Bojo is the creator of sound. And that's who we honor our voice with, who we honor those birds, those first sounds, all those sounds. The drum, everything comes from that being. And then the other being, they say, was Wayna Bojo. So in science, I don't know if you guys heard of the Big Bang, right? When they talk about that theory, right? Our people, we have that in our first story, that talk about that first sound, that Big Bang. Because it started creating after you heard that Shishigwan. They say that sound still goes across the universe. And they're still creating, when the Bojo is still out, they're creating, trying to catch that sound, trying to catch up to it. That's why there's new planets, new solar systems, all these things being created. That's in our beliefs, right? And then that third being that we honor is Nana Bojo. Some of you might have heard of Nana Bush stories or the trickster. And over my time of hearing those stories, it's kind of like the idea of evolution, right? Because they say Nana Bush came started changing the animals, because even in our language, we have words for the dinosaurs. We have words that talk about those beings. And I don't know why we have them if we, like if we never seen them, right? Or never had someone we knew seen them, right? We have words for those beings. And before I get into things, that's just a little bit about that word bojo. It's acknowledgement of all of creation. It's acknowledgement of everyone. So when we say that word bojo to each other, we're acknowledging each other in all of creation all at once. Right? So it's acknowledgement to each other in all the things. But before I get into talking a little bit about myself and my work, I like to do, when I do talks, I like to open things up with an opening song, because in our traditions, this is it's our way of prayer. These songs, these instruments, they're prayer instruments. And when we talk about ourselves and we talk about, because I'm going to get into a little bit about my family, things like that, right? So with that, so I don't get so emotional and it's not so drowned out, I'm going to sing a song and open things up in a good way before I get into that. So I hope you all enjoy it. A little bit about that song. A lot of our songs, they come in times of, some in joyous moments, some in moments when we're down, right? And that song, it's a song that came to me when my grandma was really sick. And it's a prayer song for my family and those ones. So it's like, I was told to sing that song in honor of them, right? So since I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, that story, it starts with my grandma and my grandpa. You know, that my whole journey I wouldn't be here without those people. You know? My grandma and my grandpa, they both went to residential schools. I know most of y'all probably know what those are. It was a school that was designed to take the Indian out of the Indian child, right? So they were beaten. They were told not to speak their own language. They were abused in many ways, right? If you had a family member in there, you wouldn't be able to talk to them. If you were to say hi, they would hit you. They wanted to take that out of you, you know, take that bit of who you were away from you. they would cut your hair, right? And that's one thing my grandfather went through. He left there on his own. He ran away, right? Something in him though, he went back and he scooped my grandma up. Kind of like James Bond. That's what I call him, right? Because his name was James Cada. So he was my James Bond, you know, my grandpa. I owe him a lot, and I owe him a lot of things. And that started like my journey, right, as my grandpa and grandma. And my mom, for her, she had to leave the reserve before I was born, right? Because when you think about a reserve system, what that is that's what the government put our people onto, right? The government signs a document and they're like, here, this is your land. And what it is, it's like usually the worst land. Like you hear people from James Bay and they're Swampy Cree. The reason why they're Swampy Cree is because they were put in a swamp. Like they were put in desolate territory. That it goes to like Arctic temperatures up there, like -40. And during the summer, it's black flies. It's not fun, right? So they were put into some of the worst places. And so my mom, there wasn't many people that weren't her family there. So in order for us to kind of like branch out and not have a tree that just goes straight up, right? Have a family tree that branches, she left and she came here. And a lot of my cultural journey is through this city. As much as we can be like, oh, it's a city. They call it Takaranto, right? That's a Mohawk word. And when you think about those things, like, there's so much culture in here, so much community. And when I see that word community, I work at a health center. I work at Anishinaabe Health Toronto. I don't know if any of you guys know where that is. 425 Cherry Street. No, it used to be on Parkman.
Oh,
yeah, that's where it was, Road and Sherman. But now it's on 425 Cherry Street. We got a big, huge building, and we're kind of like on the up and up now. We don't got a little clinic anymore. We're bougie. But that place, for me, my mom brought me there as a little kid. And as a little kid, I had many problems. Like I had bad asthma. I had to be on like one of those respirator machines, like to help me breathe. I had ear problems. And my mom, she brought me there to see one of the traditional healers. And he did some work on me. But first he was telling my mom, he's talking to me and he starts looking at me. He goes, okay, sing me a song. My mom looks at him. She goes, he doesn't know anything about, like, he doesn't sing. He doesn't do that. And man goes, no, I'm talking to him right now. Just hang on. He goes, sing me a song. And in that instance, my mom looked over and then I started singing, started belting out a song out of nowhere, right? So that man seen that inside me, and he seen that I had that. And at a young age, I was also told I wouldn't have much lung capacity. I wouldn't be able to sing, right? I wouldn't be able to run. I was gonna have such a bad life, they said. And I also went deaf in one ear because of operations that they did. It's called a double mass, the way they have to. So they cut my ear up and I can hear again. But throughout all that, that was the start of my journey. Right? I always felt called to the drum and the culture and these things. But I was always pushing it away as well, right? Because I grew up in the city. I grew up in Bleecker Street. I don't know, y'all know what that is? That's where I grew up, right? Bleecker Street. And so for me, I didn't know like how to be native but also be urban in the city as well, right? I had a hard time finding my way, and through all the time, one thing I can say is that I've always had community around me. I went to First Nation school. I don't know if any of you guys know where that is as well. That's one of they teach language. That's where I learned the meaning of those words, right? Because my grandpa and grandma didn't want my family to learn those. They didn't want us to learn the language because of what happened to them. So my mom put me there to learn it. My mom sought that out for me. She sought all that. And so now it's kind of like I've gone full circle, right? I've always been in community. I've always done these things. But now I'm using those tools that I gained through the years, right? Through being a peer worker, or also I was a community peer worker at Sign Molnar. I did many jobs throughout Toronto, like I was all over. But now to be back in my community, it's a big difference. As Nichole was talking about, that word Ashkabelis, right? It means helper. And that was my job at the health center at first, was a helper. And what that is for our center is you work with those traditional people. And what they do is they do ceremony, and they work through spirit. As I talked about, they heal sickness, right? We have many plants that we use, like, I don't know if you guys know, some of the first native inventions were Tylenol, right? What they would use was willow, and they would boil it, and they would take the foam off the top, and that's how they started that first Tylenol. So our people, we have an idea of the medicines, right? We know, and these traditional people, the way that they talk about it is the spirit shows them. They don't go and study plants in a book. They don't go and do these things in these ways. They're shown through spirit. And we have doctors that work at our health center as well. And they'll talk, they'll converse. Our healers, they don't have medical degrees, but they can explain everything to the doctor. And I think they do it in more like layman's terms, so they're not like over-explaining. You know, they're like, this is how it works, and this is, so they can explain it to them in those ways, and those doctors are like, how do you know that? Like, how? It's because Spirit showed them, right? So when I work with them, it's to help them prepare medicines, to help do those things. And now, like Nichole, she works with children that are on the spectrum, right? And some of her clients, when they are having a hard time, she can bring them and they'll do work with those healers. And now the clinical team that she works with, they're looking at those cases and being like, trying to use them as examples, right? So it's just a little bit about that, and a little bit about the community thing. I wanted to talk about a little bit, just a little bit. Because I was talking about that at work just the other day, right? With one of the diabetes dietitians, and we were talking about community, right? No matter what, when I leave our health center, Anishinaabe Health, I'm a member of the community. I'm always, everywhere I go, I'm always Isaiah from Anishinaabe Health. This medallion that I'm wearing right now, this is our logo for where I work. And I carry that with me always, you know? And that dietitian, they're not from our community. They're also a dietitian. They don't have the same ideas that I do, right? They don't see the health center in the same way. So they get to take that hat off at the end of the day. Me, I'm always wearing it, right? And it's something I don't think about too often, but it's something that makes me proud as well. You know, is that my community can always look to me when they're down, and they can be like, hey, can you help me? And I can go back to that health center and I can be like, here, can we look and get this person some help? Can we do this? And for me, that's like the biggest, I don't know, the greatest thing that can happen, like, because from being a little kid that went there for help to now being able to have someone help those individuals is big. So with that, I just want to say thank y'all and have a great day.
Comrades. Do we have any questions at all?
Just a really quick question. I was wondering what Professor Ramsaroop teaches if you wanted to take any of his classes.
Yeah, so I teach CSE240. I teach CSE, I think 341, food praxis, labor across the food chain, CAR 215, Caribbean foodways, 3, 2 first-year courses, and if you decide to go to law school and go to Windsor, I teach a course on migrant labor there as well.
Triple over.
Just like for the first chapter, because like you mentioned a lot of like legal like stances, that and such. I just like with the situation of like temporary migrant workers and the way that they're treated, and just the fact that the government allows it to happen. It's like it makes me think of like the Chinese people like during the early like 1900s, and it's like they were also like they came in to build our railway like through like similarly that immigrant workers are brought in to work like fields and such, and yeah whatever like the government apologized to like Chinese people like way later, but like clearly like they haven't done anything, and like like that saying of like, oh, better ask for forgiveness and permission, like it's bullshit, because like you're still affecting so many people and you're just repeating history so much, and like from a country that we work with like the common law and the precedent, like shouldn't that mean something, like from like the legal, like how is it legally like allowed for them to just repeat history? Like yeah, it might not be towards like Chinese people this time, but you're still doing it to like Jamaican workers, Mexican workers, Filipino workers, like so many people from usually the global south, and like how is it allowed? Like what?
How does this bullshit continue?
Yeah.
Alright, give me a second. The reason why I'm looking down at my notes, I just did a presentation in Vancouver for a bunch of, with me and a bunch of lawyers. I ain't no lawyer, right? But I did a presentation with a bunch of lawyers about my critiques. That thing I started off with about this lobby association, right? Why do you think that's relevant to the question that you asked? Any ideas?
I mean, like, I don't know, part of like the influence of the information stuff and like, the teaching that like, they're not wanting us to ask these questions and think this way.
As part of it, it's definitely you have to remember, these laws that are being created, particularly around employment laws and immigration laws, are not being done in all of our interests. It's a lot of powerful entities, including agriculture, who are defining and crafting laws to benefit themselves at our expense, right? Even the things that are supposed to protect workers, particularly they have something called the vulnerable open work permit, it doesn't really help workers. It leads to a period of unfreedom, to little freedom, to unfreedom. So everything's basically for two things: to protect the idea of the state of Canada, and also to protect production. Production, what I mean, is to make sure that industry growing fruits and vegetables aren't stopped, right? That their mechanisms continue. The other thing that I tell all my students, right? Our food system is a lie. Most of the produce that's produced in Canada is for export production. Ginseng, tobacco, tomatoes, wine grapes, all this stuff is for export. It's not for local consumption, right? So all that's really important. Even going through the legal system, and I know there's probably a few young budding lawyers here, and my talk, which I can't find, but there's a couple of themes that I see engaging with law stuff, right? Which is really fucked up. So currently right now, we're trying to get hundreds of thousands of dollars back for a group of workers who are owed money. So we filed with our first worker, and the first thing that they do on the first dude is an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, which means if he gets the money, he can't speak about it, which of course hurts our ability to organize with the other couple hundred who are owed this money, right? So the first thing, they roll up NDAs, and how NDAs are used to stifle working class communities, okay? Number one. Number two, engaging in legal process is hell, right? You're being challenged, you're being critiqued, we have to wait years. One of the big cases against the police is still ongoing, but it's taken 15 years. No, sorry, 13? 13 years so far, right? We're going to be taking the government of Canada to court starting in January. We're supporting that for EI, which is money that you pay into work. This is going to take at least a decade, right? Ned Peart, who's a worker who died, we undertook a case for his family many, many, many years, right? So think about what that does to a person, mental health, all these other aspects, right? Because of the structure of law itself. Three, access to justice. Most of us in this room, we can't afford lawyers, right? The other side is decked with lawyers against us. And they're gonna use time, they're gonna use extensions and everything else to try to basically draw us out and to shut us down. And the way that laws are created means that even if you're trying to fight something, there's probably something not in the books because they've made sure that those rights are not protected. So that's why organizing is important, right? The fight on the ground.
I think I was just gonna ask, like, how do you start organizing them? Like, how do you tell someone, like, the deck is stacked against you, you're not gonna be able to work, you're probably not gonna, like, you're gonna have a hard time finding a place to live and support your family? Like, how do you convince those people to then actually try and fight? You know, like, how do you do anything?
So part of this comes with trust and relationship, right? Since my undergrad, since I left so-called student politics and student activism, I've been doing this for 25 years now, right? So in addition to being in this place, I still do stuff. So it comes with a long time of relationship building. And through some of the other victories we've had, that led to that building of trust. Number two, you gotta be blunt with people. And you've gotta be totally honest, right? Let them know what the decks are stacked. Thirdly, for some people, it's like the conditions, even if things are so bad, they're gonna fight. Right? And we've had multiple cases of wildcat strikes and other ways where people said they've had enough. They're not going to take this garbage again. So, but it's about being brutally honest and letting people know about the potential implications, right? And then obviously, you know, we have, despite the fuckery, we've won some important cases. But a legal case doesn't necessarily mean an organizing victory, right? You could win legally, but you could also lose organizing. You could lose all the people you've organized with in spite of this huge legal victory.
This question is more for Isaac and Nichole. Is it possible to have a Canadian identity without feeling guilt? If so, how? And if not, what do we do?
The first thing that kind of comes to mind is one thing I wanted to do was, okay, you know, when you pick your major and your minor, right? I was like, I want to do a double major, equity studies, and then linguistics, right? So I went into the intro of linguistics, and whew, the professor loved me there because I came with an equity studies lens. but I couldn't learn the language to learn the languages, right? And how language operates. But one thing that I did love was I knew this, but I didn't fully have a really clear idea of what it meant, because I understood that we have different understandings of different things. So, you know, in linguistics, they talk about a reading of a word. It's what it means to you, right? So we have, of course, we have a dictionary that's the universal, and then we have how words evolve. So when you ask that question, I think about, okay, well, what does it mean for somebody to be Canadian? Because there's times where we've met, Isaiah and I, we've gone just to cultural presentations like that we'll go to. Like sometimes we're out in spaces and, you know, we've been asked to dance. And for some people, they're new to Canada. And this is the first time that they've ever seen Indigenous people. So we always get asked, where are you from? No, really, right? And then we think about, for them, it's Canada, right? What does Canada mean to them? It means so much. They've left home to come here for an idea, a life that's different. And I don't want to speak too much on it because I don't have that experience, but I could feel it off of them. That identity of being Canadian could mean so many different things than what I think, oh, you love the government of Canada, which then oppressed our people. So I've learned, you know, there's community members who will completely think that, right? Will be like, oh my gosh, you're celebrating Canada Day? Like, and your family might be in Canada for a few years, or maybe your parents came and you've been born here and you have family back home, or maybe, like we have how I had my family today that I told you about, they came to Canada not long ago from South Africa. So their idea of what Canada is could be much different than what I know Canada to be. So I think, I don't know, Isaiah, if you want to talk a bit, I don't want to take you. For me, Nichole, I think it depends on what your idea of what Canada is. And it must also too be hard because I think, imagine coming to Canada and you think, you know, you're coming for a life because of how capitalism has affected your homelands. And then you come here think on the idea of what Canada tries to sell. And then you realize, oh my gosh, you did this to the Indigenous people here? And then I think about that, of what that could feel like. And I don't know exactly, but I think this is why it's really important that we have our stories. Like Isaiah, I know Isaiah so well, right? I've spent so many years with him. So when he stands up here and he shares with you, who's might be hearing it for the first time about his grandparents, for me, I have a different experience because I know the story behind where you might not know. And I think this is why it's important that we tell our stories and our perspectives and we listen with an open mind because we learn more about each other, right? I don't know if that answered your question. I don't know, Isaiah.
I haven't got like too much to say about that, but it's more, as long as you come with a knowledge of the past and you don't just like put it under the rug and you're like, you understand. And as long as someone's coming with like an open mind and an open heart, to me it doesn't really matter if they say they're Canadian or not or whatever, like, but that's me, right? Someone else, they might be like, I'll never accept that. But that's something that we have to accept as ourselves. Like, you know, we have to be like, it's okay that that person doesn't accept that. And be okay with it and within your own, you know? And that's the only way I can really say it is, it's really finding that part that makes it okay for yourself. If you get my drift, kind of, you know?
Is there any other questions? In the back, yeah?
There's one here.
One back there? Okay.
Hi, so my question is for Nichole and Isaiah, and I want to mention this, I appreciate it at the end of your presentation, when sharing the actionable items that we as U2 students can do. I also wanted to pivot it towards both of you, especially with your work with supporting like children with autism, your work with Two-Spirit at the First Nations, and then the Anishinaabe House Toronto. Is there anything that you can share with us that
either as U of T students or just community members and comrades that we can do to continue to support your work as well.
Well, I think just like we're here together. That's number one. Just first know that like in all the work that you do, no matter where you're going to go, say we gathered all together here 10 years from now, right? All of us, and we gathered here. You're all going to be on different paths, and you're going to have so much that you can share in those 10 years. So wherever you are, be connected to us, right? So if you see us in community, know that it's not over there. You're here with us. Of course, if there's any community members who can really benefit from our services, know that we're right there. And also too that, because sometimes I find that for some people who are really involved in the Native community, we're right there. But some people think like, oh no, like I've had people who be like, can I even wear earrings from a Native, like an Indigenous artist? Yes. We are like, that's the whole point. We're comrades. We're together. So I think that's the biggest thing, to keep a connection, and know that we're here to support whatever work you do. Do you have anything to add or not?
I have a question for Isaiah. I know it's not exactly what you talked about, but you talked about being from the city up by St. Jamestown, so I'm curious about what you think about the role of like urbanization in Indigenous sovereignty and land back and those kind of projects, and how do you think the city kind of as a landscape changes the way you look at those things in this area of the country?
There's a lot to that question. That question's for me. I don't know. There's always so much happening. Like Nichole, like her work, they're growing so big as things are going on right now. Right? She's getting. They have a crisis team, as she talked about. Right? That's the 211. So if you call 211, you might get them. They have all sorts of buildings that are coming back to help, right? Our health center, going from a small little clinic to an actual big center, it's making changes slowly. Things are slowly changing. Like there's a little more housing for our people, like in the condos. There's a few that are opening up. But it's few and far between, and that's the thing that I see, and there's not as much of a revitalization of the old stuff that we have, like Gabriel Dumont. I don't know if you guys know of that, but that's it's a housing complex in Scarborough that has been around for I think like 50 years, around 40, 50 years, and there hasn't really been much to reestablish that. The buildings are still the same. So there is and there isn't. that's what I can really say, is that there is a thing with land back. Like we are getting some stuff back, but I don't think it'll ever be to the point that I don't know, the way that it was back when we were the only people, but I see it, there's more coming together than fighting, but there's still leaps and bounds that we can go.
Any other questions? Did I miss some comments before?
You had your hand up, right?
I have one thing to add about your question. I think to produce Canada, the Canadian state, you have to produce who are not Canadians. And we take different ways to construct what is part of our nationalist ideology and who is not part of this. So everything from the myth of the railroad, right? We see what is produced and the reason why it's produced. We never think about the Chinese laborers. Maple syrup is supposed to be as Canadian as anything else. We don't know the indigenous history behind that as well too. That's been totally erased. The idea of having migrant workers come to Canada, we're told that we need them to feed our food system, when really it's about export production. The tariffs, right now we need to be expressing pride in being Canada, but it also means about taking away protections, gutting our healthcare, gutting our social services. So it's about the myth and this mythology of what and who defined Canada. Canada is a capitalist, colonialist democracy. And many of us, when we don't think about this stuff, democracy and capitalism are not the same thing, right? So very much we have a democracy that pretty much does not work for us. So I would say that these are good ways for us to try to understand what Canada is and what Canada isn't. Who's actually reflected in this dream and ideology of Canada and who is not, and who's excluded from this process as well too. So agriculture and mining. Canada, and this is my last point, both agriculture and mining, Canada is a imperialist entity. You go to Guatemala, you go to the Philippines, Canada is destroying these countries. Same with our agricultural systems. Canada's agricultural farms, the greenhouse industries, now have operations in Guatemala, in Mexico, and Honduras as elsewhere. They're not doing this for the good, right? It's about the expansion of industrial production, which is pushing people off their lands. So I would say that's for us to understand what Canada is.
Thank you, comrades. I would say last one thing. I think, we have next week we have a section, unity comes out of consciousness. Huey's set phrase, right, statement, and this is all about that, right? And there's power and unity that comes out of consciousness. And I think for us then, what our responsibilities are and our commitments, and how I think the real we define our identities, is pushing back and pushing against and resisting all things that are colonial, right? All things that are colonially fucking us up, right? And that is how we might think about defining our identity, right? Because of course, if we go back to Asada, thinking about new ways of being and new ways of knowing, right? New people, right? New understandings of what it means to be nation, right? A new understanding of what it means to form a national consciousness, right? And a really truly liberatory form. Then that's something to work for, right? And that's something we start with our consciousness, right? And it's something we can do in our everyday lives, right? Right at this moment as we see it, right? So, comrades, much respect, much love, and much respect and much love to everyone here, right? We've probably got a couple of minutes for questions if folks have it.
Are you doing the camera?
I'm good. Let me switch this up.
Oh, okay.